There was great excitement in the forest because all the animals had just heard a wonderful piece of news. A bluebird flew from treetop to treetop, spreading the word, and soon everyone was rushing to see the great event. Squirrels, chipmunks, field mice, the woodpeckers, and the quail family, and of course, Thumper, the young rabbit, was as excited as anyone. "Wake up!" he yelled to the sleepy old owl. "It's happened!" "What's going on around here?" said Owl, blinking sleepily. "The new prince is born, and we're all going to see him." Owl took off after the other birds, and Thumper and the rabbits dashed through the woodland with the rest of the animals. They stopped at a quiet green thicket where a beautiful mother deer lay on the ground, and beside her was the new baby. "Well," said Owl, looking down from the branch of a nearby tree, "this is quite an occasion. It isn't every day that a prince is born in the forest. Congratulations." "Yes, congratulations," chorused the animals. The mother deer smiled her thanks and nuzzled at the baby by her side. "Come on now, time to get up," she said. He began to squirm and push and struggle. "Look," said Thumper, "he's trying to stand." The little fawn got to his feet and swayed about very unsteadily on his spindly legs. "A bit wobbly, isn't he?" said Thumper, as he leapt out of the way to avoid a sudden stagger. "Oh, Thumper," said the mother rabbit, "don't be so unkind." "Well, he is," retorted Thumper, as Bambi fell backwards right on his behind. Soon the birds and animals went back home to leave the young prince to sleep. All, that is, except for Thumper. "What are you going to call him?" he asked the mother deer. "Well, I think I'll call him Bambi." Thumper looked thoughtful and hopped from one foot to another. "Yes, I expect that'll do," he said cheekily, and scampered off. Although all the forest animals had been far too busy looking at Bambi to notice, someone rather important had been watching this scene from a distance. Looking down from a rocky point stood the biggest and the most handsome stag you ever saw. He lifted his head proudly so that his great antlers were silhouetted against the sky. Then silently he disappeared into the forest. Bambi soon learnt to take his first steps and began to explore the forest. Thumper became a regular playmate and taught him lots of new words. "Look," he said, pointing at the swallows flying above. "Birds." "Bird," tried Bambi. Then he saw a beautiful butterfly flutter down onto his tail. "Bird," he cried again. No, said Thumper. "They're butterflies. Look at the bright colours." Bambi then dashed over to some colourful flowers. "Butterflies," he called gaily. Thumper laughed and explained that these pretty things were called flowers. Bambi stuck his nose into the middle of the flowers, and up popped a black and white head. "Flower," said Bambi, very pleased with himself. Thumper rolled over and kicked his legs in the air. He thought this was so funny. "No," he gasped, "that's a skunk." "Well," chuckled the little skunk, "he can call me a flower if he wants to." And that was how Flower got his name. Bambi, Thumper and Flower played happily in the woods all that summer. One day, Bambi's mother said to him, "I'm going to take you to the meadow today. It's a wonderful place, full of lush green grass." "Why haven't we been there before?" asked Bambi. "Because you weren't big enough. Come along now." "Do you know," said Bambi as he skittered along beside her, "Thumper told me that we're not the only deer in the forest." "Well, he's right." "Then why don't I ever see them?" "Perhaps you will soon," replied his mother, "but hush, here's the meadow." Bambi took one look at the lovely green field and leapt off to play in the soft grass. "Bambi, wait!" His mother darted after him and pulled him up very sharply. "You must never, never do that. The meadow is wide and open, and there are no trees and bushes to hide us. You must always check very carefully first to see if it's safe." But everything did seem quite safe, and Bambi ran off to play with Thumper and the other rabbits. They went to investigate the brook that ran through the meadow. But as Bambi looked into the water, he saw two faces looking back at him. Startled, he jumped around and saw another little deer, blinking her eyes and wagging her tail. "It's all right, Bambi," called his mother. "This is your cousin, Faline." "So there are other deer," cried Bambi, and although he was rather shy at first, soon he and Faline were chasing around and having a great game. But Faline wasn't the only deer to come to the meadow that day. Out from the forest came a splendid group of young stags, leaping through the grass and over to the rocky cliffs. Then all at once the deer and the animals and birds stood very quiet and still. As if from nowhere, the great stag himself had appeared. He stopped right beside Bambi and looked down at him for a moment. Bambi was quite spellbound with admiration. Then the stag tossed his head and walked off, his antlers held high. "Mother," called Bambi, "he looked at me." "But why was everyone so still when he came?" "Because everyone respects him. He is wise and brave, and no one has lived half so long. That's why he is known as the great Prince of the Forest." Just then the birds began to shriek and clamour, and Bambi's mother lifted her nose to the wind. "Quick, we must run to the safety of the trees." Off they went, Bambi, Faline, all the deer, and the other animals too. Bambi was very scared, and for a time he couldn't find his mother in all the confusion. "What happened? Why did we run away?" he asked, as he caught up with her at last. "It was the greatest danger of all. You must learn to scent it. Man was in the forest." Summer turned to autumn, the trees became bare, and soon winter settled upon the woodland. Bambi saw his first snow and had a wonderful time with Thumper, skating on the frozen pond. But many of the forest animals had gone to sleep, and soon Bambi realized winter was not such fun after all. The ground was frozen, and there were only a few bits of bark from the trees to eat. "I'm so hungry," he complained to his mother. "I know," she said. "Let's go down to the meadow. Winter is almost over, and we may find some new spring grass." Sure enough, peeping through a patch of snow was some delicious green grass. But no sooner had they bent down to eat than Bambi's mother raised her head and looked about in fright. "Bambi, come!" Off she shot with the startled Bambi, running as fast as his legs could carry him. Bang! Bang, bang! The loud crash of the hunter's gunshots followed close behind the two terrified deer. "Don't look back!" called his mother. "Keep running until you reach the trees." Bambi did just that and arrived in the thicket panting. "We're safe," he gasped. But as he looked around, he saw that his mother was gone. Bambi was frantic. He floundered through the thick snow in panic, calling and crying. Where could she be? He turned suddenly and found himself looking up into the face of the great stag. His voice was firm, but gentle as he spoke to Bambi. "Your mother can't be with you any more. Man has taken her away, and you will never see her again." Bambi lowered his head sadly and blinked back his tears. Now you must be brave and learn to walk alone. Did you not know that you are my son? One day the forest creatures will look to you to take my place." Bambi looked up. Despite his sorrow, he was full of pride and great amazement. The stag turned and walked into the trees, and Bambi followed slowly behind him. From that day forward, the young fawn grew wise in the ways of the forest and began to learn to be a true prince.
Pooh has a surprise. This year, Pooh's birthday happened to fall on a Tuesday. "It could have been any day, really," Pooh said to Piglet as they sat outside Pooh's house waiting for everyone to come and wish Pooh a happy birthday. "But at least everyone will know Tuesday's Pooh's Day. It's easy." But it appeared that everyone didn't know. Piglet went a little way up the path a few times to see if perhaps anyone had got lost on the way or was having trouble carrying all the presents they were bringing. Meanwhile, Pooh composed a little birthday song to sing when everyone's forgotten, which went like this. "It is Tuesday today, so it's Pooh's Day today. Even though there's no one here to sing it, happy birthday to Pooh." He sang it rather mournfully, and had to sing the third line in a bit of a hurry to fit it all in, but he was pleased with it on the whole. When Piglet came back for the last time and said he couldn't see anyone on the path, Pooh said, "Let's go to Christopher Robin's house, just to say hello." But when they got to Christopher Robin's house, it was empty. "Oh, bother," said Pooh, stamping his feet. "And it's my birthday as well." Just then he saw a note pinned to the door. It said, "Gone to Pooh's party, CR." But Pooh didn't know that. He wasn't very good at reading, especially when Christopher Robin had done the writing in his squiggly up-and-down sort of way. "Well, there's a P," said Pooh, "so it must be addressed to me." And he held the note out for Piglet to look at to see what he thought. Piglet wasn't quite sure. "If it is a P," thought Piglet, "it could just as well stand for me as for Pooh." But since it was Pooh's birthday, he kept quiet. "Let's go and see Kanga, then," suggested Pooh. "Maybe she'll know where Christopher Robin is, and if she doesn't, maybe she'll have a little something for me anyway." So, licking his lips, he stumped along the path to Kanga's house, singing his new song, while Piglet ran along beside him. Meanwhile, Christopher Robin was seated in front of the big old oak tree just by Kanga's house. At the head of the table he had made himself out of some long planks of wood. On one side of the table sat Rabbit, Owl, and Eeyore, looking very serious and orderly, while on the other side sat Tigger, Kanga, and Roo, who wasn't looking the least bit orderly, bouncing up and down in his seat and trying to show off to Rabbit, who unfortunately wasn't interested. After they had waited rather a long time, Christopher Robin said, "I don't think they're going to find us." "Doesn't surprise me," said Eeyore. "You can always count on one person not having enough brains to find his own party." "Well, we'll just have to go and find them," Christopher Robin told him. "Otherwise we won't be able to surprise them." So everyone went off in search of Pooh and Piglet, spreading out through the 100-acre wood. But while their names were echoing through the trees, Pooh and Piglet arrived at Kanga's house. "Bother," said Pooh again. "No one here either. Where can they all be? It's very strange." And Piglet was just about to start singing Pooh's birthday song in a consoling sort of way when they saw the table under the oak tree. "Look at that," Pooh whispered, walking rather quickly towards it. "Cakes and honey, and sandwiches, and honey, and more honey, and—" But he didn't get any further because somehow his paw had found its way into one of the jars and then into his mouth. "I think," Piglet said awkwardly, after they'd both eaten as much as they could, "that we should leave something for whoever it was who was going to have the party. Yes, said Pooh, regretfully, as he leaned over for just one more honey sandwich. Perhaps you're right. We should leave something. And he patted his enormous stomach. Perhaps, Piglet said nervously, we should hide in case they are not at all friendly to people who eat all their food. And Pooh rather agreed with him. So they both climbed under the table and hid beneath the tablecloth to wait and see who was going to turn up. But they made themselves so comfortable that they were soon fast asleep. It was quite some time before Christopher Robin called off the search. It's no use, he said knowingly. There are some days when people don't want to be found, and this must be one of them. So they all trooped back to the table, not at all happy. And they were even less happy when they saw that all the food had gone. All of it, cried Kanga. All my sandwiches and cakes, and the special honey for Pooh. And everyone sat round the table looking very disgruntled, all except Roo, who was jumping up and down and shouting, "How exciting!" and "What fun!" When Kanga had made him sit down and everyone was quiet again, they heard a rumbling sound under the table, which got louder and louder and louder, until someone mentioned heffalumps, and Rabbit's friends and relations decided that really it was time to go home. But then Pooh stopped snoring like a heffalump and turned over in his sleep, pulling the cloth with him. "Oh!" came a gasp from all the assembled company, and several, including Christopher Robin, covered their eyes, too frightened to look at what they all thought must be a heffalump. But then Christopher Robin decided that the grunts and muffled "hoops" he could hear sounded very much like dear old Pooh, and so he took a peep. There lay Pooh and Piglet, looking very sleepy and very surprised to see such a lot of people. Pooh was sure he was still dreaming when he heard all his friends singing Happy Birthday, and it wasn't until he'd actually tasted the honey cake, which Kanga had been saving, that he was sure he wasn't. When it was all over and everyone had said goodbye, Pooh and Piglet walked home together. "Pooh," Piglet asked after a little way, "what do you like best about birthdays?" "Surprises," Pooh said firmly. "And honey. Lots of it," he added. And then he started to sing a little birthday song to sing when everyone's remembered, which went like this. "It is Tuesday today, so it's Pooh's day today. Happy birthday, dear Pooh, today. Happy birthday to Pooh." Then Piglet joined in, and they sang it several times over until they both reached home, too tired to sing any more. Robin Hood, Part 2. Maid Marian sat in her chamber and wondered what was to become of her. The wicked Prince John was keeping her prisoner in the castle at Nottingham, and she hated it there. Ugly vultures guarded the grounds, and the horrible Sir Hiss, the chief counsellor, made her flesh creep every time she saw him. If only the good King Richard would return from the wars and release her. If only Robin Hood would come and rescue her from this evil place. But what was the use of hoping for a miracle? Robin Hood was wanted as an outlaw. If they managed to capture him, they would certainly hang him. With a heavy sigh, Maid Marian turned to her companion and fellow prisoner, Lady Cluck. "Do you think Robin Hood knows how much I still love him?" she asked. "Of course he does," answered Lady Cluck soothingly. But suddenly she stopped and frowned. "Shh, listen." There were footsteps outside the room, and then a loud knock on the door. Without waiting, Prince John walked in, with Sir Hiss slithering behind him. Maid Marian shuddered in disgust. "My dear Maid Marian," began Prince John with an insincere smile, "I know you must be very bored in the castle, so Sir Hiss and I have decided to provide some entertainment for you."
Well, that's nice of you, said Maid Marian suspiciously. We're going to have an archery tournament, and all the bowmen in the district will be invited to take part in the contest. You, my dear Marian, will be the Lady of Honor, and the first prize will be a kiss from you. As soon as they'd gone, Lady Cluck whispered in Marian's ear, anxious not to be overheard. It's a trick, of course. It's obvious, my dear. Robin Hood is the best archer in the land, so naturally he will want to take part in the tournament, and if the first prize is a kiss from you, he'll be even more eager to attend. You, my dear, are the bait to trap Robin Hood. Oh, but that's terrible, cried Maid Marian in despair. We must do something. We must warn him. Well, how can we do that? We're prisoners here, Lady Cluck pointed out. There's nothing we can do. But don't give up hope. I'm sure Robin Hood won't be taken in by Prince John and that disgusting snake. Meanwhile, deep in the heart of Sherwood Forest, Robin Hood was cooking supper, and Little John was hanging their clothes up to dry on a nearby tree. Suddenly, there was a terrible burning smell, and black smoke billowed from the cooking pot. I can see you weren't thinking about the food, commented Little John. I'm sorry, said Robin Hood, waking out of his daydream and stirring the burnt soup. I was thinking about Maid Marian. I haven't seen her since we were both children together, and she's probably forgotten all about me by now. Besides, what have I got to offer a girl like Maid Marian? She's a member of the royal family, and I'm only a common outlaw. You're not an outlaw, said a cheerful voice behind them. One day people will call you a great hero. They turned round to see their good friend Friar Tuck. Well, what brings you from your church, old friend? Asked Robin Hood. Some news I'm sure you'll be interested to hear, said Friar Tuck. There's to be a big archery tournament tomorrow, and the winner will receive a kiss from Maid Marian. Maid Marian? A kiss? Exclaimed Robin Hood. Where's my bow? Where are my arrows? Not so fast, Robin, Little John warned him. The place will be crawling with soldiers, and Prince John would just love to arrest you in public and hang you in front of the crowds. Don't worry, my friend. I'm not afraid of Prince John or his soldiers. And anyway, in the disguise I've got in mind, no one will know who I am. You wait and see, said Robin mischievously. Tomorrow will be my greatest royal performance. The next day, the town was decked with balloons and coloured streamers as the crowds gathered excitedly for the tournament. Prince John sat in the royal box with Sir Hiss on one side of him and Maid Marian and Lady Cluck on the other. I think we can begin the tournament, the prince announced, looking very pleased with himself. But he didn't know that at the edge of the field, Robin Hood and Little John were disguising themselves and wishing each other good luck. Robin Hood strutted out. He was quite unrecognizable, perched on tall stilts and dressed up as a stork with a long orange beak, and Little John cut a fine figure as the Duke of Chutney in beautiful pink velvet. The Duke strode confidently right up to the royal box and bowed before Prince John. Most gracious Royal Highness, how majestic and splendid you are, he said in his booming voice. Prince John was extremely flattered and told Sir Hiss to make way for this grand and charming stranger. Who are you, anyway? Snapped Sir Hiss resentfully. Reginald, the Duke of Chutney, Little John said haughtily. And now, Your Majesty, if you can get this worm out of the way, I can sit down beside you. Hiss, commanded Prince John, go and crawl away so that the Duke may sit down. The Duke of Chutney continued to charm and flatter Prince John, while the insulted snake slithered off, fuming with rage. He was sure that Robin Hood was in the crowd somewhere in disguise, and was determined to expose him. But his plan was ruined by the good Friar Tuck, who grabbed the wriggling, protesting snake, threw him into a beer barrel, and clamped the lid firmly shut. The tournament was now underway. Gradually, the contenders were knocked out of the contest, until eventually there were only 2 left. One of them was the mean Sheriff of Nottingham, Robin Hood's worst enemy, and the other was a comical-looking stork with spindly legs and a long orange beak. Their scores were equal, and now they were preparing for the last round. The stork turned to Maid Marian and winked. Realizing at last who he was, she smiled back happily. Then a drum roll began for the 2 contenders to take their final shots. The sheriff aimed and fired. His arrow flew too high up and would have missed, but one of the vultures, obeying the sheriff's orders, lifted the target up so that the arrow struck the bullseye. "Cheat!" yelled Friar Tuck from the crowd, and everyone jeered and booed. "I've won," boasted the sheriff, taking no notice of the angry cries from the crowd. The little stork said nothing. He stepped forward and lifted his bow and arrow, but just as he was firing, the sheriff tripped him up, and the arrow flew off course. Quick as a flash, he fired another arrow, which soared into the air and tipped the first arrow down towards the target. It knocked the sheriff's arrow clean off the board. At once the crowd roared with delight. "He did it! He did it!" cried Friar Tuck. "Amazing!" gasped Prince John, for he had only ever seen one archer who could match the brilliance of the stork, and that was Robin Hood. The stork bowed to the applauding crowds and walked to the royal box to receive his prize. "Our royal congratulations," said the prince with a cruel glint in his eyes. He drew out his sword and raised it as though he were about to give the stork a knighthood. "With this I declare you the winner of the tournament, and now I declare you the loser as well." The sword came crashing down, splitting the stork's coat in 2, and there stood a fox on stilts. "Robin Hood! It's Robin Hood!" gasped 1,000 astonished voices. "Seize him!" roared Prince John, and in no time the guards had tied Robin Hood up in yards of rope. "This man is a traitor, and traitors to the crown must die." "The crown belongs to King Richard, not to you," Robin Hood shouted defiantly. "Long live King Richard!" "Long live King Richard!" echoed the crowd. "I am the king!" Prince John roared furiously, beating his fists and shouting at the top of his voice. "Now kill this traitor! Off with his head!" As slow drum beats began to sound, a deathly hush descended on the crowd, and a black-hooded executioner walked forward with a sharpened axe. The villagers stared in horror. The little rabbit children began to cry. Friar Tuck started to pray, and unable to bear it any longer, Maid Marian fainted into the arms of Lady Cluck. But all was not yet lost. Everyone had completely forgotten about the mysterious nobleman Reginald, the Duke of Chutney. Little John had one last trick up his sleeve, and he was determined to save his young friend's life.
Pluto plays guard dog. It was such a beautiful summer's day that Mickey decided to take his nephews and Pluto down to the seaside. As soon as they arrived, the boys put on their swimsuits and raced into the sea. "You stay here and guard the picnic basket," said Mickey to Pluto. "And don't forget, there's a big juicy bone in there for you." With that, Mickey too rushed away to cool off in the sea. Pluto felt very hot and very bored. How he wished he could jump into the water as well, or that someone would try to steal the basket so that he could have a really good chase. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a crab scuttle across the sand. Grrr! Pluto was after it in a flash, nose to the ground, but the crab didn't seem to want to play. All that exercise had made Pluto even hotter. He decided to curl up round the basket, to be sure of keeping it safe. But a few minutes later, his eyes were closed and he was sound asleep. He didn't even hear sneaky Black Pete, the robber, creep up stealthily. That looks promising," Black Pete muttered. "I feel like a spot of lunch." And he reached for the handle. "Yow!" he yelled. Pluto leapt up in fright to see Black Pete dancing around on one foot with the bad-tempered crab hanging grimly to his big toe. With Pluto growling and snapping, Black Pete took to his heels and hopped away as fast as he could. Pluto chased the thief right into the waves and felt how lovely and cool the water was. "That's just what I need to wake me up," he thought. "But what can I do with the picnic basket? It's not safe to leave it for a second." Then he had an idea, and his tail began to wag. A few minutes later, the twins were amazed to see Pluto pop up beside them in the water, eager to play ball. "He thinks he's a seal," giggled Ferdy. "Look, Uncle Mickey." But Mickey looked worried. "What are you doing here, Pluto? Who's looking after our picnic?" That reminds me," Mickey went on. "I'm hungry. Come on, boys, time to eat." They all raced back up the beach to their rug. "Right then, Pluto," said Mickey. "Where is it?" Pluto wagged his tail, sniffed around, and started to dig. "Isn't he clever?" laughed Morty. "He's buried the basket to stop anyone taking it." But although Pluto dug more and more frantically, it was obvious the basket wasn't there. "Never mind, Pluto," sighed Mickey. "Try somewhere else." An hour and many holes later, Mickey and the boys were still sitting there looking very grim. Maybe he's not so clever after all," grumbled Morty. "I'm starving." "Come on, Pluto," said Mickey. "Let's forget about the basket and have lunch in a cafe." The boys cheered up at once. Soon they were tucking into a huge lunch, and even Pluto got a bone.
Paintbrush Tales. One day, King Louis, the king of the monkeys, found a large, heavy tin, half hidden in the vegetation at the side of the jungle track. He couldn't carry it, so he bowled it all the way home to the old ruined temple where he lived with all his monkeys. The monkeys were very curious to find out what King Louis had brought them. They poked and prodded it with sticks and banged it with stones until finally they discovered that the top came off. It turned out to be full of sticky white paint. "Oh, no one seems to have missed it, so I think we'll keep it," said King Louis. "We can paint our home. Bright white will be a great improvement on dirty grey, and there's just time to start it before the rainy season sets in." "But what are we going to paint it with?" asked one of the monkeys. "Did you find some paintbrushes too?" "Oh dear," said King Louis, looking rather downcast. He thought for a while, and soon began to chuckle. "Oh, watch me," he said gleefully, dipping his tail in the paint tin. One by one the monkeys followed his example, and soon they were all hard at work. They sang happily as they painted, and in no time at all they had finished. Their home really looked splendid, but as for their tails, well... For months after that, everyone who passed through the jungle noticed a rare and unusual species of monkey to be found there. All of them had white-tipped tails. "It looks just as though they'd been dipped in a paint pot," they said. King Louis and his monkeys sat in the treetops smiling smugly to themselves. They had become the biggest attraction in the jungle, and they certainly weren't going to let anyone into their secret. Three Blind Mice. Three blind mice, 3 blind mice. See how they run, see how they run. They all ran after the farmer's wife, who cut off their tails with a carving knife. Did you ever see such a thing in your life as 3 blind mice?